Welcome to the Return of WADJEDI Serpent Power Podcast. Here we explore the science of serpent energy and how it is used in yoga, ritual, and medicine to achieve the highest levels of fitness, emotional and sexual wellness, financial prosperity, healing, and spiritual mastery. I'm your host, Fly Priestess, and I invite you to join me on this captivating journey of self-discovery and empowerment.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining. This is, I believe, our sixth show of the WADJEDI Yoga Physical Health Series. And today, because I like kind of connecting things that are going on in real time in our community with the discussions that I bring up here, because the problem from the solution, and a lot of times we tend to look towards all of the problem. So we look all in one direction, and as though everything can be fixed or healed just through observing the problem. And then sometimes we go all the way to the other extreme and we ignore what the problem is, or we take a kind of basic foundation of understanding of whatever our issues are, our current issues or problems are, and that's on a personal level and on a community level. But we take those issues and then we run looking for solutions or trying to work solutions, or in the understanding that we don't fully immerse ourselves in actually what's going on. And so this is another area that kind of needs to get balanced, addressed with it. So the topic today is actually discussing polarity. And there are dozens, well, hundreds really, of ways that polarity expresses itself. And we kind of tend to take polarity as masculine and feminine balance. And we tend to understand what that means when we're talking about men and women. And in a sense, we understand them just in that terminology, because we still actually, because of our loss of culture, we've lost a sense of what it is to be masculine or what it is to be feminine. A lot of that has been tainted, and what it is to be somewhere on the spectrum and what that means, because we've been tainted by other cultures and their intertwining or understanding or the less obvious sectioning off of kind of different areas and elements and what they actually mean. So we're kind of willing to throw anything in or label things in a way that we have been taught to do without really looking at what these things actually mean. But when we use other people's language and speak about, say, yin and yang, for example, people understand what it means when we come about something and talk about in terms of yin and yang and in terms of that end of polarity, because we understand what it means. But then when we talk about the onyame or talk about the sacred energy of our ancestors, there's still a lot of debate going on about, well, what's masculine and what's feminine and what does it mean and what is the dynamic between the two. And I think it's really important for us to begin to really, really examine what gender means in terms of polarity, what gender means at a cosmic level, because we are reflections of the things that go on in the cosmos. So what we do here is supposed to be a reflection of the Creator and of the creation process. We are supposed to be a continuation of that. And at the times when we are not a continuation of that, we are bringing things that are not ma'at to the world. We are upsetting the balance of creation, of intended creation. And so we need to become more consciously aware of how we express gender and polarity through ourselves, and how we interact with the dynamic of other people and other things and foods and situations which express that gender polarity, and how we interact with them. So I want to start first just by going over a few aspects of to give you an example of what polarity even means as far as gender, and then I'm going to speak more on specifically with our culture and the origins and where the gender balance begins with that. So with masculine and feminine polarities, for example, We have in the feminine polarity, something will be quiet, something will be dark, things that are private or hidden. The point of origin when a plant is still inside the seed stage, and even though we know it's a seed and it's hidden inside the ground, we know that it's going through a process. And that phase of the process when the seed is still underground, but it's alive, it's breaking into its new life and becoming its next phase of creation. But at that point in its creation, it's yin, it's feminine. And when it breaks out through the ground, rises up, and it starts to connect with the sunlight, with the sun, that's when it becomes masculine, when it's seen. And so a feminine energy would be passive and receptive, things that are small, things that are dark, things that are shade, or things that take a reflection from other things. And we have to remember, I can almost feel somebody out there saying, oh, I'm feminine, I'm not passive. We have to remember that we contain both polarities. We all contain masculine and feminine within us. And we need to understand how they operate and how the feminine and masculine dynamic within us, feminine dynamic within our body, all of our organs have masculine and feminine functions, and they have masculine and feminine aspects, especially the part of the bodies where we have two of the same organ or two of the same thing. So, for example, we have two legs, we have two arms, we have two nostrils, we have 4 chambers of the heart, so 2 chambers above, 2 chambers below, or 2 chambers on the left, 2 chambers on the right. We have 2 kidneys, we have 2 lungs. So there are, within the human body, different ways that masculine and feminine polarity affect each other. And so one organ, even though to the Western mind, the 2 organs look like they are doing the exact same thing, in Eastern and Southern, which I call African understanding, it is understood that one serves one function of drawing energy in and being receptive to energy, and the other organ will have the function of pushing the energy out or sending to other organs. And so we, by our very being, just by the very being of who we are, none of us is created from a single parent, no matter who raised us. In order to arrive here, in order to even be able to exist in this reality, we had to come from 2 parents. And so we cannot in any way separate the masculine and feminine principles within us just by the point of our creation, number one. But then, as if the point of origin is not enough, over and over and over in all different ways throughout our bodies, the polarity is expressed. So I want for a moment, and I think I may do 2 different topics, 2 different broadcasts on this particular topic, because it's a really deep conversation. We are struggling to have positive and healthy relationships with one another, and we've lost who we are. We've really lost our sense of selves, and while having lost the sense of self, we are now expected still to carry on and still to maintain and continue to function as though we are whole. And part of the functioning of a whole person is to connect themselves with another person and bond and unify. And then the polarity of their union creates new things. It creates a business together, creates children together, creates new ideas together, creates company that people can come over and visit together. There's all sorts of things. So two harmonious, flowing polarities interwoven, it has the potential, creative potential for all sorts of things in any spectrum. But we really need to truly take this all the way back to its roots. But before we even get forward to the point of understanding what it is that's troubling our relationships, I think oftentimes looking all the way back, looking all the way at the root, and even though it's a difficult and it's a far journey backwards, sometimes we, especially for the more practical, earthy type people who kind of like to work with the here and now and what can be seen, and it's really difficult to say, well, what happened at the point of creation affects who you are and why you are and how you are, and that's a little difficult for some people to grasp. But the understanding of that is really alters who we are. And I've seen it over and over. I see once people have a really clear understanding of the divine process, it changes who they are. It changes us when we know that process. For me, I've had a difficult past and a lot of difficult relationships, and the more that I've come to understand, actually the point at which I started to understand polarity and the function of polarity hit a new level of healing for my own personal relationship, changed my understanding of what it is I'm supposed to offer, what I'm supposed to bring, and understand from the partner what it is that they're supposed to bring, what is their role and function, and how I can serve that function and that role by being who I am, by being who I was created to be. So, okay, so again, those were just a few of the different points of the with yin and yang, a few different points. I'm going to call it, just for discussion's sake, I'm going to refer to it as yin and yang now. Although we need to get away from these. I'm only using that term for popularity's sake, only because when we say masculine and feminine, people immediately take it back to man and woman and then identify with or reject the different aspects of what is masculine and what is feminine according to the cosmos, and reject it because they can't find that within themselves or they don't see that in other people around them of particular gender. So rather than have people overheat their minds by trying to grasp the separation between themselves and between the actual cosmic level of gender polarity, I may interchangeably use that term, but for the long term, we need to get away from using other people's languages to describe natural phenomena, to describe elements, to describe things in existence, because nothing can serve us better than our own culture can. But okay, so I offered up a few different examples of the difference between yin and yang, the difference. So yin, for those who don't know or who may not know, yin is feminine polarity and yang is masculine polarity. So some more examples of the feminine or yin polarity would be, for example, so the feminine polarity is process oriented. We are the actual, basically when they say those words like the journey, it's all about the journey. The journey is the process. So being focused on the process itself rather than the outcome is a feminine or yin type of energy. Being focused on the goal, on the completion, on the end result, that is a yang or masculine type of energy. That's a particularity of that. And yin or feminine is connected to the relation, how things relate to one another, what is the dynamic between two things, how things can cooperate, how they can work together, whereas yang is competition. Yang and masculine energy is about competition. How is it possible to be better than something else, something that you used to be, if you're still in competition with yourself and constantly trying to improve in a sense of setting a goal for being better than you were yesterday? That is a masculine orientation. The desire to be better than is a competitive, as opposed to, well, this is my whole entire process, and I'm going to be my process, and that's a feminine persuasion, that's a feminine energy there. And being mindful, being with the energy of humility. Humility is a yin quality, because humility, yin and feminine energy, is about things that are hidden or covered. And humility is when or every accomplishment that we make, or even not seeing things in terms of accomplishment, we feel like there's no need for everyone there to have to see or know what we've done. So yang is the yang energy, masculine energy is when the ego is apparent, when the masculine energy wants everything to know that it's there. It shows on the outside. It's noticeable. It's measurable. You can see it. And the same thing with ego. So when the ego is showing on the outside, so ego, unchecked ego would be a masculine, whereas humility and being humble would be a feminine. And when moves are graceful or fluid, that would be a feminine energy. Whereas when moves are quick and sharp and powerful, that would be a masculine energy, or yang. When feeling things, being in our feelings, which so many of us are caught up in these days, being caught up in feelings rather than strategical thinking, that is a yin, that's a feminine quality to be in there. Whereas strategic thinking and making moves and intellectualizing, those are masculine energies. And intuition, it would be a feminine or yin energy, as opposed to intellectual knowing, which would be a masculine or yang energy. And sports, for example, right now we have the Olympics going on, but it's a friendly competition. It's about the art, the beauty of the human body striving to do its very best. And this is a feminine energy. When sport is an art, feminine energy, the yin energy, whereas when sport is about war, when it's the actual competition of it, the desire to beat the competitor into the ground, to dominate them and to beat them, that is when it takes over as a masculine energy. So again, okay, so these are just, again, some cosmic ways. So we want to look from the cosmos downward at what these energies are. So all these energies of these things that I'm naming are different types of dynamic, and they are all, as we know, all energies in existence, all have a consciousness to them. So if we were to go through, we would be able to find and name and connect the different energies of the different things that I was just naming, and name them and give them different deities or different energies or entities that preside over those particular areas. So creation. So in all of the process of creation, all of these different things are necessary. So before creation began, before the Creator was born, before Atum was birthed on the mound that he was on, there were others who came before him. And those who came before him, there were 8 different deities, and there's an image of them. Now, actually, I'm going to save this image and post it up in the WADJEDI Yoga group so that if anybody is interested to see exactly what they look like, how they were represented, that they can see that. But these 8 different energies are all, they were represented as frogs, because in ancient Kemet, frogs were considered something primordial and something that was hidden. So you could have what seemed like nothing in the water or in the mud, and then when the flood came, when the waters came and rose up, then all of a sudden right there in the water you could see all these frogs making noise. So it seemed like they came from nothing. So the reason that they're symbolized as frogs is because of that. So if anybody, and I actually used to live somewhere where there was a pretty deep puddle in my front yard single time it rained, and I would never see anything out there when there's in the hot sun and the dry days. And every single time it rained without fail, right outside my bedroom window for all of the day and all of the night, I could hear these frogs ribbiting. And it was interesting. It was extremely annoying. But again, when we watch nature, when we are connected to nature, we actually see a lot of the symbols of our ancestors really come to life, because I understood intellectually the symbols of the frogs and everything, but actually to witness the frogs suddenly appearing or seeming to appear from out of nothing, to suddenly have no existence and then existence of them in these puddles in my front yard every time it rained, when the waters or the noon rose up, really, really kind of deepened or gave a fuller connection to my understanding. But anyhow, that's a sidebar on my where I'm going. But so these 4 frog deities, these 8 frog deities, were the masculine and feminine principles of each of these different aspects. So there were Nun and Nunet, and they were the masculine feminine principle of the noon, of water, of the primordial wave, primordial nothingness. There were Amun and Amunet, who were the masculine and feminine divine principles of hidden things or invisibility. There's Heh and Hehet, who are the masculine and feminine principles of infinity, and when infinity got divided into time, that's theirs. And there's Kek and Kaket, who are the masculine and feminine principles of darkness. So it took water, or this primordial wave of water. It took the hidden things, or invisibility. It took infinity and darkness, and the combination of these four principles all came together through their connection. That is how the spark of consciousness first arose. So they're telling you in the beginning, from before consciousness began creation, because this is still before creation. This is still when everything existed in undifferentiated potentiality. And all the way back to undifferentiated potentiality, the masculine and feminine principles have been in coexistence. So that is so incredibly deep when you think about it. When you think that at this point in our existence right now, where we battle all the time, where we struggle to get along with each other, I see so much bickering and arguing and disconnection between the men and the women in our community. And to think that before creation even began, the masculine and feminine were united and connected. So what have we become? What have we become when we have broken so far off of that path of nature that we can't get along? Like, that's it's a real sign of our destruction that we've gotten to this place. But it's not the end, because as we come to understand it, all we have to do is fix it. And everything in creation, everything in existence is designed to help us live in Ma'at, to live in connection and order and balance. That's, as soon as creation came to be, that Ma'at, balance, order, righteousness, harmony, all of those things are the very first things that were put into existence. So we have the 8 primordial beings, masculine and feminine principles of each of 4 divine principles. And once these divine principles came together and connected, they developed this mound through their connection. And on that mound is where Atum was born. And so Atum rose up from there. And once Atum was in existence, Atum was the spark of consciousness that first existed. So Atum is the masculine principle, the force that moves forward. So consciousness, because remembering again that the masculine principle is movement and energy and force and power, the original spark creation was through Atum. And as he sent that spark of creation without the feminine principle to receive it, and she is spoken of in the origin stories as she who, and in fact the later stories that came out removed her from the stories and then said that God masturbated into creation, into being, or that he, or they just are more polite about it and say that with his hand, without specifying, but they say that he used his hand and he ejaculated everything into creation, but it was not a hand. It was the hand of God, who is the woman, the feminine. That is the feminine principle. That's the same thing that we reflect here in an earthly level, is we are here, we are the receptors of that energy. We are here to receive and reflect that energy to a certain space, and it can become something. Because if you think about it, when we talk about reflecting something, if we think about reflection all the time in terms of, say, for a mirror, for example, of reflecting an image. But say, for example, what about reflecting heat? So in the winter, when we wear a T-shirt, all the heat is radiating off of our body, and it just flows away from us, and dissipates and gets connected with all the other airs and energies that are around, and then it ceases to be. So we become cold because our heat is just radiating off into nothingness from us. So what do we do to fix that? We put on a sweater, and the sweater, because of the way that it's made, is actually reflecting the heat that radiates off our body. It's reflecting it back down towards our body. So in between the area where the heat radiates away from us and the sweater is catching the heat and sending it back to us, in between that space is where the heat is captured and held. As long as we wear the sweater, we will continue to stay warm because the heat is now contained. It is its own thing. It's contained in between our skin and our sweater. And in the same way, in creation, if the spark of divine consciousness would just reflect and reflect and it would just dissipate and dissipate and dissipate, it would continue in that sense to be the noon. It would continue to be undifferentiated potentiality because it would just be thought waves, or this thought. And it can't become a wave until there is something at the other side of it reflecting it back. And then once it's held in between the space of where the energy is sent from and where the energy is reflected from, that space in between becomes creation. So again, we have before creation began, before the spark of divine consciousness existed, there was still the masculine and feminine principle. And then at the point of creation, the feminine energy is what held the masculine consciousness awakening. And again, when we look at the cosmos, this is the way our ancestors described the point of origin of existence. And I'm going to pause again another moment here just to explain for everyone who may have been raised up in kind of a Western or perhaps a Christian kind of mentality with their understanding. Because of this, it may be difficult to grasp the concept of the divine masculine and divine feminine principles as coexisting in that way. And then also, again, because some people are not necessarily believing in Christianity or in the Western religions anymore, but may be so severely scarred from their experience with that they reject everything that it has, and they will fight against the notion that the masculine principle is the creator force, without recognizing still. So there are still two different types of principles going on here. The masculine principle is the one that began the spark of creation, but without the feminine principle, there is no way that the creation could have come to exist. So they still fully work together. We have to understand at all times in existence, these 2 points were together. Remembering that, we need to take full assessment of who we are and where we are now as African people. If we can claim African culture or call ourselves African, we need to also hold ourselves to the standards of our ancestors, to hold ourselves to the standards of our culture. So we have to look at how closely we represent, how closely are we the earthly manifestation of this divine interaction between the two polarities. So there's another point here that I wanted to add and share, because once we know that creation began, so there was the spark of consciousness and there was she who held it, and between them creation began. And as immediately after that was done, there was Ma'at. Immediately the next thing that was created, the first thing that came into existence was Ma'at. And this is there are so many of us who forget that Ma'at also has a masculine and feminine counterpart. We speak often of Ma'at, and especially a lot of people will go to amazing lengths to dissect why balance and order and harmony and justice and truth and righteousness are all a feminine principle, and that is completely inaccurate. there is Ma'ah and there is Ma'at. And they, again, just like Heh and Heh and Kek and Keket and Amun and Amunet, just like everyone else, and Ra and Rayet, just like all of them, Ma and Ma'at are the two different halves. They are the two polarities of divine righteousness, order, justice, balance, and truth. So just to give a little brief history on how our minds came to forget that Ma'ah even existed, in the ancient Greek version, if anybody is familiar with, in like a courthouse, the court of justice, or court of law rather, of the law of this land, there is a woman who's blindfolded, and she's holding scales in her hand, and this is obviously stolen. This is Ma'at, who is the balance, which this is her symbol. Now, in ancient Greek mythology, the goddess, there was no god of balance, order, and harmony. There was only a goddess, and her name is Dyke. Now, as we probably know, most people probably know that Dyke is in these days considered a derogatory word for a homosexual woman. But when we consider that in the ancient Greek, again, removing the masculine and feminine polarity from the equation of creation helped them to develop the kind of culture of death and destruction that they still carry on today. The story of Dyke is almost completely taken from the ancient Kemetic story, which is that Ma'at she was born from the Creator, and in the Greek mythology, the goddess Dyke was born from Zeus, who is their creator god, who is a homosexual and pedophile god, and from one of his affairs that he had with another goddess, the goddess Dyke, who is the goddess of divine order, justice, balance, and harmony, was born. So if we can even wrap our minds around the fact that a goddess can be born out of a goddess of righteousness and harmony can be born out of the cheating of a man on his wife and creating somebody else, and then we're supposed to accept her, who has no male counterpart, as the goddess of balance and harmony that we are supposed to be reflections of in this reality here on earth. So again, is another example of how we can see how the stories are twisted. But because this version of Dyke, and who was later in Roman times called Justitia, they have no male counterpart. And so because they are the versions of Ma'at who went forward into Western culture, and because we don't often look back deep enough into our own culture to find the truth, everybody has taken for granted that Ma'at stands alone. But I just wanted to let everyone know that this is where this comes from. But please do your research and find Ma'ah and recognize that, again, in all of our deities, the existence of both has always been there. The existence of both polarities has always been there. So this is important to note. Now, again, moving forward and moving to the body, and to how create ourselves into reflections of this divine polarity, divine gender balance, because we've clearly gotten so far away from it on many levels, and we've gotten away from it at the physical level of our health, of allowing things, of allowing medicine to dictate to this medicine, Western medicine that their goddess of justice and harmony is a lesbian, for their medicine to dictate to us that only things which can be shown on the outside of the body will represent imbalance. So only if we can see it, then it's going to be an imbalance, and then we'll do something about it. And if we can't see it, it's on the inside of you, then it's not true, and we're not going to believe in it, and we're not going to believe it until it expresses a symptom. So a symptom is a masculine principle. A symptom is the part that you can see. the origin of the imbalance, the hidden thing, is the feminine principle, and it's the thing that you cannot see. So we allow, through our health, allow polarity imbalance to lead us and guide us through our relationships with the opposite gender, whether those relationships are parental, brothers and sisters, friends, or partners, intimate partners and mates. We allow this half of a story, of this broken piece of gender polarity, or staying too far to one side of the scale or the other, to lead and guide our story here as African people in this time. And within the body itself, with the way that the organs function, again, and I had mentioned earlier about how everywhere in our body that we have two organs represents a masculine and feminine principle. That means they have that the masculine and feminine principle in those organs is so pronounced that they require two distinct organs to work in harmony with each other in order to make the process flow the way it's supposed to. For example, with the kidneys, for example, with the lungs, with the chambers of the heart. And then again, obviously, we have two legs, we have two nostrils, we have two arms, we have two ears, two eyes. And all of these have functions that operate on both. And obviously, it's for the use itself of just being able to move around and navigate in balance. But there are many types of beings that exist that don't require two legs or two arms, that don't have any legs at all or any arms at all. So we're not designed this way by accident. So, and part of it is for environmental function. But the way we are created is always made with a system of the balance of the gender polarities. So the one organ in the body, or well, the two organs, I should say, in the body that have the most direct connection to polarity, to gender polarity, kidneys, and the kidneys affect every single other organ in the body. The kidneys affect the function of every single thing that goes on, every process that takes place. So because of this, the kidneys are a really good place for us to start when we go and we do yoga and we do physical work that's actually going to draw us back to our health. Because remember always, as above, so below. We speak that all the time, but we don't really think about working the as above, so below. Because when we correct our physical health, we make changes in the spiritual realm also. Our physical bodies are tools of manifestation and reflection of divine and cosmic reality. So by changing the story that takes place in our physical bodies, we also change the story taking place at a higher level as well. Now, I just want to point out a few things about the kidneys also. And this may sound bizarre. It will sound new to some people, especially people who are not familiar with yoga or who are familiar with yoga as the purpose, the true purpose of yoga is not just stretching. The true purpose of yoga is to create your being, to recreate your being into an earthly reflection of the divine. And so, again, when you focus on particular organs and on their path and what they're supposed to do, that reality, the new reality that you create through your organs, will change the story that is reflected upward. So the kidneys, as we change our kidneys and bring them back into balance, because the kidneys affect every aspect of the body, and because they are such strong reflections of the gender polarity and this connection, and that they work together in such perfect harmony when they are healthy, then by correcting the balance in the kidneys, we actually can begin to change the flow of hormonal function in our body, change the flow of the lymph, change the regulation of the heartbeat, change the lungs, and we can begin to change ourselves and our own vibrational field, and also into developing better relationships with other people. When we change the gender balance within, and we consistently do this as a practice, eventually this becomes a reflection upward of how we are, and it begins to change the polarity of how we exist and how we relate to other people around us in a gender and polarity capacity as well. So the kidneys are batteries. So I'm gonna read a section of the WADJEDI yoga Understanding Serpent Power book that speaks about the kidneys, because this is an important organ here. We're going to focus for some more time on correcting the hidden imbalances of this organ, because we truly can change our entire being just by focusing on these, because they work on every single aspect of the entire body. So the batteries of our bioelectrical, chemical, magnetic, physical beings, and contain the power that allows us to manifest our willpower into the world, because the very life force essence is stored in them. Any lack of the masculine polarity in the kidneys will manifest as fear and lack of willpower. A lack of feminine polarity in the kidneys will manifest as being competitive and having a desire to dominate situations or others. When the masculine energy of the kidneys is weak, a person lives more in fear and acts with less determination than that of a person with stronger and more balanced kidney essence. When the energy of the kidneys is strong, the person makes bold decisions and follows through with a strong mindset. Both polarities of the kidney essence can be depleted in several ways, including spending excessive physical energy, having excessive sexual activity, eating the wrong foods for the kidneys, living in a fearful environment, and experiencing physical, mental, and or sexual abuse. Because the kidneys have a hand in the function of literally every aspect of the physical form, when they are undernourished or experience physical or other types of trauma, the imbalance created in them may cause a person to experience symptoms in everything from ear ringing to lower back pain to issues with the central nervous system to poor short-term memory. They may experience premature graying of hair, excessive craving of salty foods, incontinence, infertility, miscarriages, low libido, feeling cold easily, diarrhea, hot flashes, night sweats, various sexual dysfunctions, urinary tract infections, kidney infections, asthma, having a rancid odor under the armpits, for example, and getting startled easily. It is not commonly known that the kidneys regulate even the skeletal system, so that when there are kidney imbalances, the bones can become fragile and or deformed, such as an osteoporosis. Kidney deficiencies also lead to dry hair, thinning hair, and eventually baldness when the imbalance has been left uncorrected for a long period of time. One reason that baldness, among many other traits that we see but don't see, one of the reasons it's considered, quote, undesirable, is a latent understanding that a certain level of sexual potency has been reduced in the individual. The masculine energy of the kidneys provide heat to other organs like the spleen, heart, and stomach. A masculine energy deficiency in the kidneys manifests as cold feet, imbalanced temperatures, neuralgia in the extremities, and discomfort in the lumbar region and small joints. The kidneys open their external window in the body through the ears and genitals. The kidneys are connected to the opening and closing of the anal sphincter, the urethra, and the vagina. When the kidney's masculine energy is depleted, this will manifest in men as a decrease in sexual energy, weak libido, low sperm count, circulation, infertility, etc. In women, this depletion manifests as vaginal dryness, menstrual imbalances, difficulty in keeping a fetus in the uterus, and issues with the correct formation of the embryo. The kidneys act through the mouth as the oral lubricant saliva, moistening and assisting food digestion from the moment food enters the mouth. When a masculine kidney imbalance exists, one could experience mouth and tongue dryness, especially at night. A feminine imbalance will manifest as nighttime drooling. And in relationship to the hearing, that when the kidney energy is harmonious, the ears are able to hear the full range of tones and sounds. Deficient masculine kidney energy manifests as deafness, ringing, noises, and disorders in the ears. As we can see from the many, many bodily functions that are affected by the proper functioning of the kidneys, ensuring that these organs are properly cared for and loved is of utmost importance. Okay, so, and I just wanted to mention too also that if anybody is interested, the WADJEDI yoga book that I'm reading from is the first of my books in a series